The one-handed backhand is often called one of the most beautiful shots in the game, and it also comes with some added advantages such as reach and being able to generate angle. But a lot of people get themselves in trouble when they choose a one-handed backhand because they don't understand some of the ins and outs of what it takes to actually hit one well. Welcome to today's Tennis 101, where we're going to be going over the one-handed backhand. And before we get started, guys, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, if you're new to Tennis 101, please watch this video that I'm going to put right here, which lays out the foundation for what grips you should use in order to do any of the things that I've been covering in the Tennis 101. So getting back to the one-handed backhand, there are a couple of checkpoints that you're going to want to have covered as you go to work on hitting it. Obviously, as I said, the grip is the big one because that's where you start. But after that, we've got some big cue points that we have to make sure are in place in order to hit one well. The first one is going to be setting your shoulders, not setting your arms. When I say setting your shoulders, I mean you want to get your shoulders turning 90 degrees towards whatever your backhand side is. For me, I'm right-handed, so that means my backhand is going to be on my left side. And at the same time, we're going to be shifting our grip using our non-dominant hand. A lot of people get themselves in trouble by trying to change the grip with their right hand. But when you go to set that racket, use a non-dominant hand to set that racket behind you. Once we've got ourselves in that position, the rest of the stuff kind of flows from there. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is where our power actually comes from. Now, I'm not talking about legs and momentum. I'm actually talking about shoulders. When you hit with a two-handed backhand, your power source is located behind you. So your non-dominant hand is doing a lot of the driving through the shot. But when you hit a one-handed backhand, you actually pull your dominant arm. So you go from a pushing motion to a pulling motion. And as a result, what we do with our core is going to change. Trying to bring the power from the back if you're a two-handed backhand is going to require more rotation into the court. But when we hit with a one-handed backhand, we're going to cut that rotation off. We can start the rotation to generate some momentum, but once our body lines up, we're going to let the arm move without the body and extend through the shot. So if I was facing the court, which is going to be the camera right now, as I go to set myself in that 90 degrees, as I go to release that racket, the racket's not going to come across the body. The racket's actually going to extend towards my target with my chest still staying where the ball was struck and basically extending in a straight line towards where I want that ball to go. So shifting to this angle here, I want you to watch the extension of the arm relative to where the target is. Where a lot of people get themselves in trouble is when they start trying to go cross court, they'll actually open up their body more and try to drag across. You want to still keep your chest closed and extend the whole arm in the direction. So the body language is actually going to say where the ball's going. So let's say I want to go cross. I'm going to set myself up in this position, and I'm going to extend my arm in that direction. Meanwhile, my chest stays here. If I want to go line, I'm going to extend my arm that way, and my chest still stays in that position. What you don't want is to start opening up the body and pulling across too early. A lot of people activate the hands too much. You want to keep that shoulder as the dominant force into the motion, and instead of releasing the hand to try to generate spin, you just want to create more upward motion from the drive of the shoulder instead of from the release of the hand. So now that we've covered what goes on with the arms, now we have to go to the south part of the body and talk about the legs. Now you can use any stance that you choose. However, closing versus opening lend themselves to different parts of what you want to happen with the ball. For example, whether you have a two-hander or a one-hander, using the open stance is usually focused on generating more upward motion or coming around the outside of the ball. You can do that with a one-handed backhand, but it is a little bit unnatural when we talk about trying to keep the body closed off and facing that way. So if you hit with an open stance because the situation calls for it, you're just going to be really conscious of not allowing your body to open up in this position because it is primarily a very core-driven motion. What you'll see with a lot of one-handed backhands is they'll just tend to close their stance a little more naturally because they don't need that extra body rotation. So as the ball comes to them, you'll see them just step into this position and release the arm. Now, what that causes as a problem is you will have to be very clean with your footwork because contact point cannot be compensated like when you have a two-handed backhand. With a two-handed backhand, that back arm can kind of muscle you out of some weird positions. But with the one-handed backhand, you need that momentum to be fluid and through the ball. There's not a lot of room to mess up and then make a last second adjustment because the arm is usually in a compromised position where that's not going to work. So by taking our step into the court, we have to make sure that we spaced ourselves appropriately, that even as we step in, we don't take away our space and we're still able to generate this contact point here, which is about waist high and a foot to a foot and a half in front of me, depending on your body type. We want to make sure that we're still able to generate this spacing and not end up here when we step into the ball. So shifting it back to this angle again, pay attention to the way the feet are moving and just be conscious of what you want the ball to do. So most people are going to find themselves stepping forward and still trying to maintain this contact. But sometimes what happens is you step in and you end up jammed up a little too much, in which case you just should stay open and extend the arm without the body. As I said, it doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means you have to make sure your chest stays this way as you go into the open stance, because with the two-handed backhand, it's a lot more natural to step out and bring the racket and everything across the body. But with the one-handed backhand, you've got to hold and keep the chest still pretty much where the contact was. And lastly, the biggest thing that comes in using the one-handed backhand versus the two-handed backhand is how we use this non-dominant arm. As I said, with the two-handed backhand, we're going to be pushing that motion through, which is where our power is going to come from. But with the one-handed backhand, we're actually going to create opposing force by pulling the racket back, kind of like when you pull a rubber band at both ends and then you release one side. So as I go to set my racket for my backhand, obviously my shoulders turn, but then what I want to do is create some tension in my non-dominant arm by pulling it back. And that way, when it's time to swing, I'm going to release that racket into the court. I'm not going to use my backhand to push into the ball. I'm going to pull it back and then I'm going to let it go. And that's basically going to slingshot it forward into the ball. Now, what you have to do as a result is line up where that racket is being set so that you can do a better job of releasing upward, for example, or releasing forward, for example. But the main thing is going to be using this non-hitting arm to create some tension, which is going to create acceleration into the shot because you don't have this arm to generate the force that you would if you were pushing into the ball. That racket is not going to be braced at this point behind it, so you're going to have enough momentum to carry it through the stroke. Quick side note before we close off this video, guys. Remember, there are three main ways to hit your ground strokes. We have flat, we have the rally shot, and we have the heavy shot. And I'm not counting the slice because that's a different technique. But when you're hitting any one of those shots, you're going to have to decide what it's going to be way before the ball shows up, especially when it comes to the one-handed backhand because contact point is so important. So if you guys remember from other videos that we did, with the heavy shot, we're going to be going primarily vertical up through the stroke. With the rally shot, we're going to be right in the middle. And with the flat shot, we're going to be pretty much a horizontal swing. But because we're setting it using that non-dominant hand to create some tension, we're going to want to pull up more when we're going for the heavy shot, because then we're going to let it go and it's going to drop and then raise. We're going to go with the flat one. We're going to pull back more and then let it extend toward the court. And then the rally one's going to be right in the middle to help generate that motion. Now, when you go out and practice it, just be aware of which one you're trying to do so that you can set your hands appropriately for that shot. But that's going to wrap up today's video, guys. As always, if you know anybody who would benefit from this or needs to work on their one-handed backhand, please send this off to them. Remember that the one-handed backhand has a lot of moving parts and there's also a lot of pressure on one arm. So be nice to yourself when you're practicing it. Try to break these different components up and practice them separately, because it does take a lot of coordination, which is what makes the one-handed backhand so difficult, but also what makes it so rewarding when you actually hit it well. That's going to wrap it up, as I said, and I hope to see you guys in our next Tennis 101.